Massive crowds are turning out in Birmingham, England for Ozzy Osbourne's funeral. The Black Sabbath frontman and heavy metal legend died last week at 76, just weeks after playing his final gig in that same city.
On July 30th, 2025, Birmingham came to a standstill as thousands lined the streets to say goodbye to its most legendary son, Ozzy Osbourne. Fans chanted his name, a brass band played Iron Man, and his family, including daughter Kelly, walked beside the hearse through the city that made him. It was more than a funeral. It was a final homecoming. But behind the public farewell was something far more intimate. In the final weeks of his life, Ozzy revealed a heartbreaking last wish, not to his wife Sharon, but to Kelly Osbourne. In the final weeks of his life, Ozzy Osbourne's world became quieter. The man known for his wild stage presence and chaotic energy spent his last days surrounded by family, away from the spotlight. His long battle with Parkinson's disease had worn him down physically, but his mind remained sharp. And during that time, one of the people who stayed closest to him was his daughter, Kelly Osbourne. Ozzy and Kelly had always shared a special bond. While Sharon had been by his side through decades of highs and lows, Kelly was the one who often connected with him on a more personal level. As his health declined, Kelly became one of the few people he opened up to the most. They spent a lot of time together, talking, remembering, and just being in each other's company. He was calm, Kelly later said. It felt like he'd accepted it. He wasn't scared anymore. Those who saw Ozzy in those final days said he had changed. His energy was lower, his body more fragile, and his voice softer. But his sense of humor was still there. Even as his condition worsened, he found ways to joke, often in his typical dark style. "I might be falling apart," he told Kelly one day, "but at least I'm doing it in style." Ozzy had always been a fighter. Even after being diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2003, he kept pushing forward, making music, performing when he could, and staying connected to fans. But by mid-2025, things had changed. Multiple surgeries, ongoing treatments, and the slow progression of the disease made it clear that the end was approaching. He spent more time resting and more time with family. He was no longer thinking about fame or performances. Instead, he reflected on his life and the people he loved. It was during these quieter days that he and Kelly began having deeper conversations. They talked about his childhood in Birmingham, his early days with Black Sabbath, and what really mattered to him now. Kelly said those talks felt different, more honest and more meaningful. One night, he told her something he hadn't told anyone else, a final wish. At first, he didn't say it outright. He hinted at it, saying things like, "I just want to go out the right way," or "I don't want people to remember me in this state." But eventually, he opened up completely. It wasn't about leaving behind more music or doing one last interview. It was something much more personal. He wanted to feel like himself again, even if only for one last moment. And he trusted Kelly to understand what that meant. She didn't say much at the time, but she knew how important it was. It wasn't a casual request. It was something he had clearly been thinking about for a while, and something only a close family member could help him with. She listened carefully, knowing that this was no longer just a conversation, it was a responsibility. During those weeks, the entire family stayed close. Jack and Amy visited regularly, and Sharon took on the role of coordinating his care and comfort. But Kelly had become his emotional support. She was the one who heard the full weight of what he wanted before he passed. A final act of closure, something that went beyond his illness. While the public only saw glimpses of Ozzy's decline, behind closed doors, his family was preparing for what they knew was coming. And while the end was near, it was also clear that Ozzy had found some peace. He knew his time was limited, but he also knew he had people around him who would carry out his last wish, especially Kelly. He wasn't focused on being Ozzy Osbourne, the rock star. He just wanted to leave the world in a way that felt right to him. And with Kelly by his side, listening and quietly preparing, he had the one thing he needed most in his final days: someone who truly understood. When Ozzy Osbourne told his daughter Kelly about his final wish, he didn't say it with ceremony or drama. It came out during a quiet conversation, one of many they shared during his final weeks. But to Kelly, it became a moment she would never forget, one that would define the rest of her time with her father. Ozzy had spent decades as a rock icon, the frontman of Black Sabbath, the wild solo act, the unpredictable figure on reality TV, but in his last days, he wasn't that version of himself anymore. He was John, the father, the husband, the man whose body was failing but whose mind still held on to memories, emotions, and a deep need for closure. Kelly had seen every side of him. As a child, she watched him tour the world, fall, rise, and fall again. As a teenager, she lived through the chaos of the Osbournes, the reality show that exposed their family to the world. And as an adult, she came to understand the private version of her dad. Funny, sensitive, sometimes fragile. So when he began talking about his past and what he still wished he could do, she listened closely. He kept coming back to it, Kelly said later. He'd say things like, "I don't want to be remembered like this," or "I wish I could feel like myself again, just once." Then one evening, he finally said it clearly. He told her that his last wish was to perform, one final time, in Birmingham, the city where he was born, where Black Sabbath was formed, and where his journey as an artist began. He didn't want it to be a big production. He didn't want it to be polished. He just wanted to say goodbye the only way he knew how. On a stage, in front of people who understood where he came from. It was a lot to take in. Kelly sat with it for a few moments, not responding right away. She knew it wouldn't be easy. His health was failing quickly. Even small movements exhausted him. He hadn't been on stage in months, and yet she also knew this wasn't a casual request. This was her father's way of asking for dignity, not in the spotlight, but in the feeling of being whole again. "I knew he wasn't asking for a comeback," Kelly said. "He was asking to feel like himself one last time." She told him she'd make it happen, not because it was simple, but because it mattered. And from that moment on, she quietly began working behind the scenes. She reached out to family members, longtime collaborators, and friends from the music world. She talked to her mother and to Jack. She got in touch with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, the remaining original members of Black Sabbath, to see if they'd be willing to join. To her surprise, almost everyone said yes right away, not just out of respect, but because they understood what this was. It wasn't a concert, it was a farewell. Planning the event was delicate. His condition had to be factored into every detail. He couldn't stand for long. He couldn't move freely. There were concerns about sound, lighting, travel, even the temperature of the venue. But Kelly didn't back down. She coordinated everything with care, working around his limitations and protecting his privacy. He didn't want the world to know what was happening, Kelly explained. He just wanted to go out on his terms. What made the moment even more meaningful was that Ozzy had chosen to tell her. Not Sharon, who had managed his career for decades. Not Jack, who had become a media personality in his own right. But Kelly, the daughter who had stood beside him through rehab visits, awkward TV moments, public backlash, and deeply personal struggles. He trusted her with this because she had always seen him as more than a musician. She had seen him as a person. In the weeks leading up to the show, Kelly spent every day with him. They practiced together. Not full rehearsals, but short, quiet sessions where she'd play songs on a speaker and let him hum along. He didn't have the voice he once did, but when the music started, something changed in him. He'd sit a little taller. His eyes would light up. For a few minutes, he wasn't tired. He wasn't sick. He was Ozzy again. There was this look in his eye I hadn't seen in a long time, she said. It was like the switch flipped. The music brought him back. Still, there were setbacks. There were days when he was too weak to get out of bed, when he questioned whether it was worth it. But each time, Kelly reminded him, "You're not doing this for a headline. You're doing it for you." And he'd nod, quietly, with that same half-smile that had been with him for decades. The night before the performance, Kelly helped him get ready. She laid out his stage clothes, black, simple, familiar. She adjusted his necklace, helped him put on his signature round sunglasses, and gave him a hug. "You've already done it," she told him. "Tomorrow is just the celebration." He didn't say much, but he held her hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you." That moment, just the two of them, became the emotional center of his farewell. Not the lights, not the crowd, not even the songs. Just a father and daughter, sharing a promise and delivering on it. Ozzy's final wish wasn't about ego. It wasn't about reliving glory days. It was about returning, even briefly, to the place and the feeling that had made him who he was. And Kelly made sure that happened. She didn't just organize a concert. She gave her father a proper goodbye, one filled with love, music, and meaning. And in doing so, she gave the world a final glimpse of the real Ozzy, vulnerable, honest, and at peace. To understand the impact of Ozzy Osbourne's final wish, you have to understand everything that came before it. His was not an ordinary career, and he was never an ordinary artist. Ozzy didn't just help shape a genre, he helped create one. His story began in Birmingham, England, but the sound he helped bring to life would echo around the world. Born John Michael Osbourne on December 3, 1948, in Aston, a working-class neighborhood in Birmingham, Ozzy grew up with few options and fewer expectations. School was difficult, money was tight, and by his teenage years, he'd already been in trouble with the law. But everything changed when he discovered music. It gave him purpose, identity, and a way out. In 1968, Ozzy joined forces with guitarist Tony Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, and drummer Bill Ward to form a band that would later be called Black Sabbath. Together, they created a sound that was darker, heavier, and more aggressive than anything else at the time. It was music that spoke to the working class, to outsiders, and to anyone who had ever felt angry or alone. Their self-titled debut album in 1970 marked the beginning of something new, what many now recognize as the birth of heavy metal. With songs like Paranoid, Iron Man, and War Pigs, Black Sabbath exploded onto the music scene. They didn't chase trends or follow radio play. They created something raw and honest, and fans responded. The band's success was massive. Millions of albums sold-out tours around the world, and a growing legend that followed them wherever they went. And at the center of it all was Ozzy, with his distinctive voice, unpredictable stage presence, and a personality that was both intense and strangely endearing. But Ozzy's rise wasn't smooth. Fame brought pressure, and pressure brought problems. Substance abuse became a constant battle. His behavior grew more erratic, and in 1979, he was fired from Black Sabbath. For many artists, that would have been the end of the road. For Ozzy, it was a new beginning. Later that same year, he launched a solo career with the release of Blizzard of Oz, an album that included now iconic tracks like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. The album's success silenced any doubt about his ability to stand on his own. More albums followed, including Diary of a Madman, No More Tears, and Osmosis, each filled with tracks that became anthems for generations of fans. He worked with guitar legends like Randy Rhoads and Zakk Wylde, and over the years, his influence only grew. He earned Grammy Awards, toured endlessly, and built one of the most recognizable brands in rock. Even people who didn't listen to heavy metal knew the name Ozzy Osbourne. And then came the Osbournes. In 2002, MTV launched a reality show that followed the day-to-day lives of Ozzy, Sharon, Kelly, and Jack Osbourne. What started as a quirky experiment quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The show revealed a different side of Ozzy: confused, funny, stubborn, and deeply human. Viewers who had once seen him only as a bat-biting, wild-eyed rock star now saw him as a dad who couldn't figure out the TV remote. For Ozzy, it was both a blessing and a challenge. It introduced him to a new generation of fans, but it also made his private life very public. Still, the show's success showed that there was more to Ozzy than stage antics. There was a full, complicated person beneath the persona. Throughout the years, Ozzy continued to stay active. He released more music, collaborated with artists across genres, and remained a towering figure in rock culture. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame both as a member of Black Sabbath and as a solo artist. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammy Foundation. In his hometown, Birmingham, he was honored with the Black Sabbath Bridge and commemorative bench, physical reminders of the journey that had begun there decades earlier. Yet for all the awards and accolades, Ozzy never lost sight of who he was or where he came from. He often spoke about his roots in Aston, his memories of childhood, and the pride he felt in representing his hometown on the world stage. In many ways, Birmingham never left him, even when he was performing for 80,000 fans across the globe. That's what made his final wish so meaningful. Ozzy didn't want to say goodbye in Los Angeles or London. He didn't want a flashy awards tribute or a glossy documentary. He wanted to return to where it all began, to the city that shaped him, inspired him, and gave him his first audience. His career had taken him far, but in the end, all he wanted was to go home. Not just physically, but artistically and emotionally. The power of Ozzy's legacy isn't just in the music he made, it's in the influence he left behind. Bands like Metallica, Slipknot, Avenged Sevenfold, and even non-metal acts have credited him as an influence. His image is iconic, his voice is unmistakable, and his presence, both on and off stage, changed what it meant to be a rock star. He was chaotic, yes, but he was also loyal, funny, emotional, and endlessly creative. He took risks, made mistakes, and never pretended to be perfect. That honesty, in his music, his interviews, his family life, is what fans connected to most. He didn't hide who he was. He owned it. That's the legacy Ozzy left behind. One that was never about perfection or image, but about staying true to who you are, no matter what. And in his final act, with a little help from Kelly, he made sure that message came through loud and clear. When Ozzy Osbourne told Kelly his final wish, he wasn't asking for a farewell tour or a spotlight-heavy send-off. He wanted something simple but powerful. One last performance in the place where it all began, Birmingham. For Kelly, making that happen became her mission. It wasn't easy. His health was declining quickly. Just standing for long periods was a challenge. But she knew this wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about giving her father one final chance to be who he was. A performer, a singer, a man defined by music. With help from Sharon, Jack, and a tight-knit team, Kelly quietly began organizing what would become a historic event. She chose Villa Park, home of Aston Villa Football Club, not just a large venue, but a place with personal meaning for Ozzy. It was close to his childhood neighborhood, a stadium he'd known since youth. And for one night, it would become the stage for his final bow. The concert was planned carefully. Every detail accounted for Ozzy's health. A custom-built black throne was placed at the center of the stage, strong, elevated, and surrounded by minimal lighting to reduce fatigue. Medical staff were on standby. The set list was short, focused on a few meaningful songs. There would be no pyrotechnics, no long speeches, just music. The lineup was carefully chosen too. Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Anthrax, and other longtime friends of Ozzy performed tribute sets. But the emotional peak was reserved for Black Sabbath. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, the original members, agreed to reunite with Ozzy for one final performance. It would be the first time the original lineup played together in over 2 decades. On July 5, 2025, Villa Park was filled with 40,000 fans. Tickets had sold out in hours. Millions more watched online via live stream. The crowd was electric, but also respectful. People understood this wasn't just a concert. It was a farewell. Kelly walked Ozzy onto the stage herself. He was dressed in black, his hair tied back, sunglasses on. He waved once, then took his place on the throne. The crowd erupted, many already in tears. For a moment, the air felt heavy with both excitement and finality. He opened with, "Mama, I'm coming home." The first few lines were shaky, his voice weaker than it once was. But by the chorus, something clicked. His tone strengthened, his eyes lifted, and a smile spread across his face. Kelly stood just off stage, watching with quiet pride. She knew how much this meant to him, and how much it meant that she was the one who helped him get there. After the song ended, he spoke briefly. "I've missed you all so much," he said. This is where it all started. Thank you for bringing me home." The next song was Crazy Train. As the opening riff rang out, the audience roared. Ozzy didn't move much, but the energy in his voice was unmistakable. The crowd sang every word with him, giving him strength. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made it unforgettable. Then came the reunion. The stage lights shifted. Iommi, Butler, and Ward stepped out, each greeted with thunderous applause. When they took their places beside Ozzy, something remarkable happened. It was as if time briefly rolled backward. The 4 of them, once young rebels from Birmingham, were now older, wiser, and facing the end together. They played 3 songs, War Pigs, Iron Man, and Paranoid. Each hit like a wave. Not because of the volume, but because of what they represented. Decades of history, friendship, music, all distilled into a few final moments on stage. Ozzy's voice cracked during the chorus of Paranoid, but he pushed through. When the final notes ended, he looked out at the crowd, then at his bandmates. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the fireworks. The sky above Villa Park lit up in deep red and gold. The crowd shouted his name. Ozzy stood, with help, and raised one hand high. A final salute, a thank you, a goodbye. Backstage, Kelly met him with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said. "No," he replied, smiling faintly. "We did." The show raised over $189 million for charity, but that number was barely mentioned. Everyone who attended or watched knew that the performance meant more than money or records. It was closure. For Ozzy, for his fans, and for Birmingham. Media outlets around the world covered it with reverence. Headlines called it a perfect farewell and a once-in-a-lifetime moment. But for Kelly, it was something deeper. It was a promise kept. "He just wanted to remember who he was," she said afterward, "and to remind everyone else too." That night would be his final time on stage. 17 days later, on July 22, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne passed away at the age of 76. But in those final weeks, he had done what mattered most. With Kelly's help, he had gone home. Musically, emotionally, and literally. He left the world not as a fading legend, but as a man who found peace through the thing that had defined him all along: music. News of Ozzy Osbourne's passing on July 22, 2025 spread quickly. and hit hard. Just 17 days earlier, he had delivered a farewell performance that fans and fellow musicians would never forget. Many had suspected it might be his last, but few realized how close the end really was. When the announcement came from his family, the message was simple and heartfelt. It is with more sadness than mere words can express that we share that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne passed away this morning. He was surrounded by his family and held in love. The impact was immediate. Across social media, tributes poured in from around the world. Some came from longtime collaborators and friends, others from younger artists who had never met Ozzy but were shaped by his influence. Sir Elton John was one of the first to post publicly, "Ozzy was a trailblazer, a one-of-a-kind performer, and a dear friend. He changed the face of music forever. There will never be another." Metallica, who had shared the stage with Ozzy at Villa Park earlier that month, posted a simple photo of the band and Ozzy backstage. No caption, just a broken heart emoji. Ronnie Wood of the Rolling Stones called Ozzy a true Birmingham legend, while Slash from Guns N' Roses said, "He made weird cool and darkness fun. I owe him more than I can say." Tony Iommi, Ozzy's oldest friend and Black Sabbath bandmate, shared a longer message. "I still can't quite believe it. We had just played together for the first time in decades, and now he's gone. Ozzy wasn't just my bandmate, he was my brother." For fans, the loss felt deeply personal. People shared old concert footage, selfies from meet and greets, and messages about how his music had helped them through difficult times. Some traveled to Birmingham just to leave flowers at the Black Sabbath bench, or to walk the path his funeral procession had followed days earlier. Local news stations replayed moments from the Villa Park concert, which was now seen in a completely new light. What had felt like a celebration of legacy was, in fact, Ozzy's final act, a performance planned and delivered with full awareness that it would be his last. Even those who hadn't followed his music closely felt the loss. Ozzy had long been a cultural figure, and not just in rock. From his bat-biting controversy in the 80s to his chaotic charm on the Osbournes, he was someone people recognized. And for many, he was a symbol of resilience, someone who made mistakes, got back up, and kept going. That's part of why the tributes felt so honest. They weren't just about fame or success, they were about who Ozzy was as a person. Fellow artists spoke about his loyalty, his kindness backstage, his sense of humor. Fans shared stories about how approachable he was, how often he said thank you even when he didn't have to. For the Osbourne family, the response was overwhelming. Sharon, who had spent over 4 decades by his side as a wife, manager, and partner, thanked fans in a brief statement. "Ozzy loved you all, truly. Every time he stepped on stage, he did it for you. And in the end, he left this world doing exactly what he wanted, with his family, with music, and with love." Kelly, who had carried out his final wish, remained quiet in the days after his death. But when she finally spoke, her words were simple. "He got to go out on his terms, and I got to help him do that. I'll carry that forever." The city of Birmingham announced plans to expand the Summer of Sabbath exhibits in his honor. Murals, concerts, and educational programs were scheduled through the end of the year. The bridge bearing his name was lined with fan letters, guitar picks, and black candles. What stood out most in all the tributes was the sense of closure. Ozzy's final performance wasn't just a concert, it was a gift to his fans, to his bandmates, and to his family. It gave everyone a chance to say goodbye. For a man who had lived much of his life on stage, there was something deeply fitting about ending it that way. And for the people who loved him, the memory of that last performance, and the courage it took to do it, would remain long after the final chords faded. Ozzy Osbourne didn't leave the world quietly. He left it the way he lived, surrounded by music, family, and emotion. His final performance at Villa Park wasn't just a farewell concert. It was a closing chapter in a life that changed music forever. And at the center of it was his daughter, Kelly Osbourne, the one he trusted to carry out his most personal wish. For Kelly, helping him go home, to the stage, to Birmingham, to himself, was more than a promise. It was a tribute to the man she had known her entire life. Not just the frontman or the rock legend, but the dad who made her laugh, who showed up for her, and who wanted one last moment of truth before saying goodbye. What she gave him was something rare, the chance to end his journey on his own terms. In the end, Ozzy Osbourne wasn't defined by illness or age. He was defined by legacy, by music, by family, and by that final night in July when a city stood still, a crowd sang back every word, and the Prince of Darkness took his final bow, not in silence, but in celebration. His voice may be gone, but his echo remains. In the riffs, the records, the stages, and in the memory of one last performance made possible by a daughter's love. Ozzy Osbourne is gone, but his story and that final wish he shared with Kelly will never be forgotten.